All right, so welcome back to our next exciting episode here. I am back with Clara Moisello, and this is kind of a follow-up to our last. We were, really talking about needs awareness. Our last podcast was about needs awareness, and it occurred to us that there's a series in here. There's so many different topics that we can talk about and really break down into smaller parts how needs awareness fits into life, how we can use this to make our lives better, frankly. And so today we're going to talk about how we can use needs awareness to lubricate our conversations, to make communication just work better. And I think we've all had situations where we have something we want to deal with. It's awkward. We don't necessarily know how to talk about it, but we know we want to talk about it. And so we sometimes call these difficult conversations. And so needs awareness is just a perfect thing to use to apply to these sorts of situations. So Clara and I are going to talk about that for a little bit today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Clara, and we're going to pick it up from here. So, Clara.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Thom. Yeah, I am excited about this because there's so many different topics that we can explore through this lens. And our hope, I think, is to both bring you an idea, but also every time bring you a practical example of how this can show up in your life. And so and you can let us know if there are other topics that you'd love for us to explore. So difficult conversations. This is one I think that comes up so much when something is happening that in some way is affecting us. And how do we go about it? We may be concerned about it for a variety of reasons, right? And so should we break it down with a possible example, Thom? What do you think?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do that. So one that I sometimes like to share with people in the workshops I do, it's something that I consider to be quite simple, mundane, maybe really something that we can all relate to, because sometimes we think we come to this work and then we imagine that we need to address what you would call the Super Bowl situations, like the most difficult one. But we can start small. And so the example that I would like to play out with you, Thom, and for the people who are listening is let's imagine a very simple scenario where you have a coworker, a colleague, someone that works with you that has been arriving late to work or maybe late to meetings that you're having. And you're seeing this and you're not happy about it. And so this is something that you would like to address. We could call it a problematic behavior, right? Something that you're seeing and it's not working for you. So that could be the starting point. And can I continue with that, Thom? Can I ask you some questions so we play it out as if...
Let's go for it. I mean, one thing I guess I would add is like, there's almost like a before and after here. In that when we typically would deal with a situation, we would be thinking about like, how can I make this person get here on time?
Yeah.
Right. And that's the typical, and which, by the way, is what contributes to it being a difficult conversation, right? Because here we are trying to get somebody to do something that maybe they don't want to do, or maybe they don't even want to hear about it. And so it's not just the situation that's difficult, the original lateness, if you will, but there's also the situation of the relationship that we have with that person, and how needs awareness can play a great role in this, because the typical way we would deal with this, not through needs awareness, but just through, I don't know, just trying to power through, right? Trying to just get that person to do what you want them to do. And we all know how that goes when somebody wants you to do something you don't want to do, or somebody's accusing you of doing something wrong. So needs awareness gives us the after here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is not, so what we're going to demonstrate is not the typical way we might deal with this, which again, can add to the fact that it's difficult. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And let's take it away, Clara. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah, yes. And in some ways, to expand on what you said, indeed, the focus typically, or maybe the most common, and of course, I'm curious if that will resonate with people too, when we want to go about this situation, would be much more focused on the outcome per se, right? We wanna change the behavior. The other thing that I invite also listeners to think about is that when we see something like this, usually the first thing that comes up could be that we have judgments about that, right? So the maybe if we were to go with the more instinctive or impulsive way to address that, that would probably come from some ideas that this person is doing something wrong, and what could be some other judgments that could come up in this situation.
Right.
What do you
They're
think?
being inconsiderate, they're being lazy, they're being self-centered, they're mucking with
Yeah,
our lives. They're
yeah, they don't.
messing us
Yeah,
up, right?
they don't care about the work. They don't care maybe about us. They're irresponsible, and fill in the blanks if you're listening to what you think. Maybe you have had that situation in your life. Or you can't trust them, and so on. And then usually, as you were saying, Thom, then what follows is that in order to change that behavior, the most common way that we're used to is to use our power over that other person. What does that mean? It could mean that, again, we try to judge it and maybe threaten that there might be consequences if that happens. In some ways, we try to have the behavior change more from the person feeling bad about themselves because they're doing something wrong, and then and it
Or
might work at
scared,
times, right?
right? Or scared because,
Yes.
and so now we're wielding this, perhaps a threat of reporting them or going to a superior. And so you you can imagine, right? Very easily, even at this point, if this is where we're at, this is not going to go, it's like not going to go well. It's almost guaranteed at this point that this is going to be a rough situation, tough
Mhm.
situation to deal with.
Yeah, yeah, and then and so as a result, maybe again the behavior might change, maybe in the short term, because very often change that comes this way might not be a sustainable change, because as we will see, doesn't address the underlying reasons. And I think I recall Marshall would say that anytime some behavior changes, let's say out of this energy that we don't have choice, that there's going to be consequences, that and so on, out of guilt, out of shame, or so on and so forth, you would say everybody pays for it. Everybody. We pay
Yeah,
for it in lost connection. We pay for it because maybe there's going to be a resentment that builds up. And frankly, we pay for it also because maybe it's not, again, going to work in a sustainable way.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And by the way, we're talking about Marshall Rosenberg, our teacher, who we call Marshall all the time.
Yes.
And I just my little 2 cents on this one is I think resentment is almost a guarantee. Right? It's almost a guarantee. And all you have to do is imagine, right, being on the receiving end of a threat and then kind of submitting to that threat. Can you imagine saying, yeah, so I understand, of course, I'll do this because if I don't, I'm going to get in trouble. And that makes perfect sense to me. So thank you for that. It's just not going to happen that way. If it happens, it will come back somewhere along the line. And almost always it comes in the form of resentment.
Mhm. Yeah. So what could be an alternative way. So let's do a redo of that, right? So we said this first route of power over, we want something to change. We judge the heck out of it. We try to make it so that there's going to be consequences, and we'll see. Maybe it changes, as we said, but in a way that can build disconnection and resentment. Now let's try to do the same path, but with this addition or of this new, let's say, lens of needs. So we start from the same point, right? There's something that we're seeing that's not working for us. But now, instead of going the judgment and blame route, we can still notice that we have those, because those will likely be there. That's how we're used to think. But instead of then sort of going deeper into that direction, we take that as almost like an alarm signal that can take us to look towards needs. And when we look towards needs, we can start maybe from ourselves. So if it's something is not working for us, it means that some needs are not met. Otherwise, we would not be noticing it. So there's something important that's being affected. What could it be in that sense? In this case, I'm imagining trust,
Effectiveness, efficiency,
consideration, choice,
right?
yeah. Maybe consideration and respect, partnership.
Yeah. So I just want to reflect something here or reiterate, because this is
Yes.
such an important part of the work that we do. And that is that every judgment, every moralistic judgment, everyone, so notice I'm not saying some of them or most of them, like every judgment that we have has a need behind it or underneath it, however you want to look at it. And this is really an important thing, because that means when we know this, then what we're doing is, instead of bringing that judgment, and we all know how much fun that is, right? If somebody's coming to you with their judgment of you, like, I want to talk about how inconsiderate you are, that is not going to go well. So we have an opportunity, because we know that every judgment has a need under it, and needs, unlike judgments, are universal and acceptable to us. We understand needs well because they're so universal. And so what we're going to do first off, right, is to notice that we have these judgments, not say, oh, I shouldn't have them, but say, might not work for me that I have these judgments. And then what can I do? So we translate them. We call it translating, which means we're going to go look for the needs, which is what we were just doing there. So we were just kind of brainstorming here on what needs could be beneath that judgment of your being inconsiderate, or you're being self-centered, or you're mucking things up here. You're ruining this for me, for us. And so what we do is we take those rather unacceptable or unreceivable or difficult to receive messages, and we go deeper. We go underneath them to the needs. And right, we're talking about difficult conversations. So what are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to take a difficult conversation and make it less difficult. And so right away, this is one of the first things that we can do by using our awareness of needs, knowing that every judgment has a need beneath it. Let's go look for the need. And now we can start to shift that conversation from the judgment to the need. And all of a sudden, now we've just taken a level of difficulty away from that situation.
Absolutely. Sometimes I call this, let's talk about what's precious to us rather than what's wrong with other people, right? We do that shift, and that's the first centering our communication on what matters for us, which, as you said, is likely to be a universal quality, and therefore something that hopefully we can both agree that matters to us.
Yeah, and by the way, sheds the right wrongness of it, and kind of moves us into this realm that Clara was just talking about, which is it doesn't work. It's not that you're doing something wrong, but I'm having a hard time here because it's not working. And so now we're shifting perhaps from a demand, like you have to behave this way, to could you help me out here? I have something that's not working and I'm coming to you to talk about that.
Yes. And then there's the second part of that, right? That we can bring the same lens to try to understand what is happening for the other person too, as you may remember from either the previous episode that we've shared or any if you have the chance to work with Thom or myself, we start from the idea that any behavior can be seen as connected or an attempt to meet some needs, the expression of some needs. And so the second part of this conversation is approaching it with some curiosity about what might be going on for the other person as well. What could be their needs? What could be the context they move from? And so that can then lead you both. You can start, let's say, this guessing already internally, and then of course you can continuing it in a dialogue with the other person. But just for the sake of trying out together, you can try that on your own as well. What could be some different scenarios that we imagine could potentially be affecting my colleague and causing them to be late?
Yeah, could be a childcare situation, could be a transportation situation,
Yeah. So
right?
it could be maybe in some situations something about not feeling motivated or engaged, maybe in enough at work, and so that's showing up as being late. Any other idea from you, Thom?
Yeah, well, um, yeah, it could just be the timing is wrong for them, like the actual time frame that our situation calls for doesn't match the time frame of some other part of their life.
Yeah.
And so I just want to point out here a little, look from above here, which is that what are we doing here? We're not talking to anybody yet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This is
Exactly.
all getting ready. So much of what makes a difficult conversation less difficult is the work that we do before we get there, right? Before we even start the conversation, we're doing this process. And what we could call it very quite simply, right, in the realm of needs awareness, is this needs-based self-empathy. What do I need? What are the needs that are kind of falling short for me? But yet at the same time, what are the needs that this other person may be struggling with as well in order to make this happen?
Mhm.
So there's this kind of checklist, you could say, that we're going over. And so instead of going into the conversation with our original set of words and ideas, lazy, inconsiderate, etc., now we have a whole new set of things like effectiveness, efficiency, perhaps, some they're having some difficulty. So we're not uh, assigning blame. We're not taking, assigning wrongness. We're not making them wrong. We're just, again, having this kind of sense of curiosity about what is going on for them.
Yeah.
And of course, what's going on for us. So we're doing our homework. We're getting ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking also it could be maybe there's something about wanting more freedom and choice potentially about the timing. And I hope our listeners can start sensing how different some scenarios might be, which I hope makes you understand or helps you to understand why one solution let's say one solution wouldn't be able to address necessarily all of these nuances. It's not just about let's make this person arrive on time, but it is about what could help this person arrive on time, and whether it's they're dealing with some struggle and some difficult situation at home, whether they're needing more engagement or motivation at work, or maybe, as you said, just some more flexibility because the timing may not work. Maybe it could even be about shared reality. I'm thinking maybe they don't realize that that is very important to us, and it just doesn't even occur to them. And so I hope listeners can see how different the approach is for each of these situations might be, and that addressing this root in a way that shows up as needs can then help making the solution, pardon me, sustainable and more effective in the long run. And as Thom was saying, now we're not even in the conversation yet, we're imagining. And this sort of empathic imagination or empathic guessing that we're doing already shifts our state a little bit. At least I know it does for me. And when I do this prior to a conversation, I start realizing, oh, there's another human in front of me. There isn't just a problem, and it brings me to the conversation with a much different energy. I don't know how that sounds to you, Thom.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I totally agree. Yeah, I imagine if you're watching or listening to this, you might have a sense of a shift already. In other words, we're not, as Clara just said, we're not just looking at a situation. We're looking at now a group of universal human needs that are at play here. And the thing that also I experience, and again, if you're listening or watching, you might imagine this too, there's a lot more creativity available to us, because look at the factors now that we're now not just open to either you're late or you're on time, in this like, yes or no environment. But it's now we're like, well, look at all the things that come into play here, my needs, their needs. And so the creative aspect of this situation has shifted already. We haven't even started the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I was smiling because it actually reminded me of something that really happened even in our relationship, in our meetings. I don't know if you remember, Thom. There was a point where we realized this meeting is too early. It's too close to the compassion course call. People kept arriving late, and we kept being a little frustrated, a little resentful. And at some point, we were saying, you know what? How about we meet 15 minutes later? It was as simple as that. And it brought a smile to my face to realize. And the other thing that was coming up and really remembering something that I heard from you a while ago, which was the idea of how this prep work, let's say, that we do before entering a conversation like this, hopefully takes us to a place where we enter the conversation with such an openness and curiosity that the conversation is not about getting to a specific outcome, but is about understanding what is going on for the other person with such openness that maybe I'm ready to leave the conversation with a, you know what? Yeah, okay. Arrive late.
I'm late.
That's fine.
I'll figure something out. I'll keep myself busy for 10 minutes, right? Whatever, right? But it's again, it's kind of, well, I call it needs liberation, right? It's like this, when we stop looking at the strategy and the situation, and we start looking at the needs. Now we can start to adjust. Like when I used to meet a friend of mine who always, whenever we had lunch, he came 10 minutes late. So and I would talk to him about it. He would still keep coming 10 minutes late. And so I was like, you know what? Bring my phone, bring a book back in the day, right? Bring a book, keep myself busy, because what was it that I wanted? Well, I wanted a little more choice, as I wanted more effectiveness, more efficiency. And I realized that I could provide that simply by shifting what I did in that situation. And so we're giving you all these spoilers now, like all these, right, all these ways that we could end up. in a situation like this. So let's just suppose, I think we're ready. We've got, we've done our self-empathy. We've done our empathy. We're curious about what's going on. I want to add something here because, right, here we are, we're trying to take a situation and make it less difficult. So one of the things that can make a situation like this difficult is, how do you start this conversation? Do we jump on to the conversation? Do we just hit that person with the conversation when they come in the door? When I'm upset about it. So there's a couple things. Number one, strike while the iron is cold. One of my favorite phrases. It isn't necessarily the best time to have this conversation when you're kind of agitated and we're in the midst of the problem. So now we're in double jeopardy. We have the problem, which is stimulating us, and now we're going to try to fix the problem from being inside the problem. We're already 2 strikes against us. So the idea here is to be, and we can, if we think about it, if we become a little thoughtful about this, that maybe we'll have the conversation way later on in the day, maybe at lunch, maybe when we're having a good time. And so that the connection is there and we're not starting to, all the way out, in this disconnected state. So that's one thing. The other thing is what I call a meta conversation, so that I can, before I even get into this conversation, instead of jumping into the conversation, I can create a little bit of I can move gently into the conversation. I can ease into it. And how do we do this? Well, we've already done our homework. So now we have some material to work with in order to talk to our colleague. And so one of the things that I may be aware of is that I'm a little anxious because I'm a little nervous because I do value this relationship. This is an important relationship. We work together every day, and I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous that this is going to create a rift between us. And so I know this. So I can share this, and we call this a meta conversation. In other words, it's a conversation about the conversation. And that way we can kind of take the edge off of the conversation particularly, and maybe express what we call some vulnerability, just to say, look, this is kind of how I am. I'm honestly, I'm concerned. I don't want this. This is a hard conversation to have. And I'm afraid we're going to get disconnected and you're going to be resentful, or I'm going to say something that's going to be very stimulating. And I just want you to know that this is how I am. And also that I just want this to work out for both of us. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to say you're doing anything wrong. I'm just asking for a solution here together.
Yeah. Yeah. And then from that point, very often it happens that people, maybe in workshops or sessions, may ask me, so what do I say then once we start the conversation? And here is the place where I think what I like to, in my experience at least, I don't think there is a formula to follow, which is what I love of the way we approach this work. For me, the gist of it is that I want to center my expression on what's important for me that I would like to experience in our relationship. And so it could sound something like, I've noticed over the past couple of weeks that you've arrived late to our meetings, and this is bringing something up for me. And I would like to understand better what's coming up for you around this. I know for me, I love to have a sense of trust in our relationship at work, know that I can count on you, and that maybe we have a sense of shared understanding. And but I realize I don't know what's going on for you about this. So would you let me know, or can you share? Did you even notice that, or what's up about that for you? And so there isn't and some of you maybe that have had some experience with the NVC sometimes can be brought in that traditional sort of format. Oh, I'm seeing this, I'm feeling this, and I'm needing this. So just getting just getting on time. Why
On
don't
with
you
it.
just get in on time?
I said the magic words, now behave,
Yeah.
right?
Well, in this needs centered way, we like to use the expression it's connection before action, right? It's connection before correction. So that first stage of conversation is really, hey, I reveal with vulnerability, like you were saying, Thom, something that's having an impact on me. And I open up to see what comes up for you. It's important to realize that even though it may lower the level of difficulty, it might still be a delicate conversation. It doesn't mean that it immediately becomes oh yeah, easy peasy, and we move through that. But I think it becomes a different conversation. I don't know what.
Absolutely. And I love that phrase, right? It is literally a different conversation. We're using different words, different thoughts, different approach. One little thing I would add is even the word late, we want to be careful about things that may be considered, derogatory or something like that. And so I might even say, I've been noticing you get here about 10 after 9
Mhm.
every day. And the reason I say that is because for all we know at this point, maybe the person thinks that 10 after 9 is on time, right? And so let's just, the beauty of making observations, like scientifically almost, is that it kind of takes, again, it's just one little layer less difficult when we know we're just talking about like something that's actually happening, not our perception of it,
Mhm.
right? And so and we talk about observation, right, as this one of the elements of the work of nonviolent communication, compassionate communication, and so it does have some great value, indeed, to be able to make observations which are, like I said, almost scientific in their nature, and it's just one other way that in this little scenario of ours, right, we're just trying to make it less difficult. And I love what Clara just said. It's not going to make it easy necessarily, but yes, we can make it, not only make it less difficult, we can make it more productive, more sustainable, more permanent. And, in the old way, I was just, of the kind of coercion and threats, then the person will say, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I won't do that again. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's by the way, the precursor to the resentment
Yeah.
later on. And it is also the precursor to nothing changed at all here in
Yeah.
the reality of it, right? And
Yeah.
so what we're doing here, what we're talking about by approaching this from a needs aware perspective, is that we really have a much better chance to make this a actual working permanent solution. And I can tell you in my life, these are the ones that stick. These are the ones that do create permanent change. These conversations where we get to the actual root of the situation, right? And that is that we're all trying to meet our needs. And so when we can address that, when we can make a situation, turn a situation into one where people's needs are met, by bringing them to the surface, by bringing them into the conversation, that's when it starts to work better. That's when life starts to work better on all different levels, including this one that we're talking about now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm first of all so glad that you caught that nuance of late. Even as I said that, I felt like my kind of a little knot, and I was, and so glad you noticed, because I think it's helpful for people to hear that too, and it can be so subtle. Like we're so used to certain words that we may not even realize that in reality they have a mix already of evaluation or interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing I was thinking as you were sharing now is how it is. It's not usual, right? Sometimes we say there was what we're doing in a way might not be what people are used to, and so sometimes I think even when we genuinely come from a place of sharing from our needs and with vulnerability, people may still think they were judging them, and people may still think they have no choice. I think it's an important thing to keep in mind that these types of conversation may take the time to build a new trust in our relationships. And maybe the first times they may require saying, hey, I know this may sound weird or this may sound new, but I really want to understand what's going on for you. I mean, and it's important to me. And so we can foster that step by
Yeah.
step in our relationships. And the more we do, the more maybe these conversations wouldn't be difficult at all. They're going to become, how can we make life more wonderful? And rather than, how can I make you feel guilty about what you're doing so that you'll change? Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a little microcosm of what we could call cultural change, really, in the workplace, right? We could really be changing what it's like to be in that space. And not just in the workplace. And as you were talking, I was recalling conversations with my children where I have, basically spent, maybe the last 12 years coercing them and, playing the power over dad and just trying to make them behave. It took a while before they could understand that I was trying to take a different approach. It was hard for them to believe, in fact. And so I love what you're saying, Clara, that this it's contagious over time, and it does work, but it may not work. I want to be clear that it's not like these are magic words. We say them and we sit back and wait for the beauty to roll into the situation. This is it is cultural change. It actually is a form of cultural change. And so we are, the thing is, we get to be the vortex. We get to be the where that happens. And so one of the things in needs awareness in particular is that it starts to spread to those around us slowly but surely if we stay with it,
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that there's a little warning label here, like Clara just said, and that is, just because we've done all our homework, it doesn't mean it's going to work the first time. And it may need some reiteration. It may need some support, some reassurance that no, this really, I mean this. I mean this. I'm trying to make this work. I'm not just trying to get you to do something, even though that's what I've been doing for the last 12 years of your 14-year life, right? So if in the case of my children. So, and for most of us in our workplaces,
Yeah.
most of our lives are, in this environment. We live in environments where people are told what to do,
Yeah.
right? That one human gets to tell another person what to do. And so this is not that,
Yeah.
right? Not that.
Yeah.
This is what we call power with.
Yeah.
This is us trying to put it out there, put out what is going on for me, what's going on for them, and being able to come up with a solution.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it takes some trust even on the part of, let's say, us being the person who's wanting to start this conversation. I think sometimes what I hear people share, and I frankly have that experience myself, it can seem that if I try to understand the other person's needs, it will mean that I automatically suppress mine, right? That it's going to be that I have to agree with the other person, or that everything is going to be fine. And I think it's important for me to remember that that's not what we're talking about, right? And it might take some time to grow that trust that what another expression that I love this from you, and probably also from our other teacher, Robert Gonzalez, that I can hold to the needs strongly, but all the strategies lightly, so that I can still really be very firm on, these needs are very important to me, but I soften the grip on the specific way I can have those needs met. And so it's very important, maybe for me as
Well, that's the creative element right
yeah,
there,
but
right? That's where we get to be creative, because as long as our needs met, it doesn't matter like how they get met as long as they're met, unless for some reason we're kind of attached to specific strategies, which is going to certainly make this whole process that we're talking about just simply not work. And so this does require us to really get those, you know, again, we're talking about needs awareness, which is that, yes, we need that element in the picture. That's what this is about. This is what we're kind of functioning around. And so that is a big part. It's a big part. And I know that does require some work on our parts to develop our needs awareness in order to be able to depend on that to make conversations like this work. And so another or maybe continuation of that warning label is that maybe we're not as good at this as we will be in the future because we are trying something new.
Yeah.
And again, that can be part of the meta conversation as well. Just to say, I don't know, I've never done this before, but I want to try it because I think it'll help. And, so again, that self-connection we can bring that connection and maybe help the other person or help the situation, be a little more connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I hope we gave quite a few nuggets or ideas for people to try on. Maybe my invitation or suggestion would be, if you're watching or listening, just even try on that prep work that we described. Think about maybe a situation, even imaging one, doesn't even have to be a real one, where there's something you're seeing that you're not liking to see, and just try to explore both your needs and imagine what could be the other person's needs and see what happens. I think that for me, even just trying that, and if people want to let us know their discoveries via the comments here on YouTube or on the podcast, I would be very, very curious to see. But I think, and just see what happens there, see how that, if and how that changes your experience. And I think that's already a large part of the work.
Yeah. So based on all this, I think it'd be fun to talk about what could come from this. Let's think of, what are the various solutions or requests that could be made or agreements that could be made. Okay, so the first one would be the first one could be the person didn't even know that it was important to us, and that they would, in the recognition of that, that was the missing link for them. They didn't understand that this was creating an issue. And so maybe that alone, really, we'll start with the easiest ones, right? The simplest ones. That alone could perhaps do it. And let's suppose we found out that it had something to do with the train schedule. So maybe we could realize that's the issue and tweak our schedule so that it would be more in line with the train schedule, and so that it would become more achievable for that person to show up at the agreed time. And maybe 9 o'clock isn't the best time for us to be meeting. Maybe 9:15 is the best time for us to be meeting. Mm-hmm. And so there's another thing that could come from that, is that we decide to actually change what it means to be, quote, on time, right? Mm-hmm. We could shift our schedule.
Yeah. I imagine we could possibly have an agreement about communication about it. If you expect to be late, can you let me know with some advance so that I can adjust? I see that could be one. I also see that, of course, if the situation had to do with the level of engagement and motivation at work, we could explore where that comes from and create different conditions, whether involving maybe the person wants to work on a different project that is more fun for them, or of course there could be myriad of possibilities there. Maybe we can brainstorm ways to support them if they have a childcare issue, or someone that they are caring for at home, and we could brainstorm ideas for that. And sometimes maybe the real conversation is not about the lateness, maybe it's about our connection and what is going on there. And so many possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be that I'd be like, you know what? now I understand why you get here at 9:10, and I will account for that.
Yeah.
Even though I may get here at 9, but I'm sure I can figure out something to do for 10 minutes. And again, this comes from how could I be ready to do that? Because I've let go of the wrongness. I've let go of the should, shouldn't thoughts around this. And I've explored this through needs awareness. And so we've changed the conversation.
Yeah.
So
So I hope everyone is ready now to go talk to your late coworker from that.
Yeah, get out there. Okay. Don't forget to do your homework. Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, this is so fun to talk about these things with you, Thom. I hope it's as at least half as fun for people that listen to us.
And look, we talk about needs a lot. If you'd like to get hold of what we call a needs list, just go to Thom Bond, THOMBOND.com, and just go into resources. And you can get their downloadable lists of needs, of universal human needs. I believe there's 104 of them. And just to help get some clarity, to use that as a little worksheet for yourself. And yeah, let us know how it works out. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
And watching. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Thom. Till next time.